Hello, everybody. It's Walter, your favorite historian, educator, social studies extraordinaire, and professor, here today to teach you how the United States quite possibly could have adopted a parliamentary form of government as a result of the Constitutional Convention of 1787. All right? So if you're not familiar in any way, shape, or form about how parliamentary government works, you will by the time this essay is complete. All right. So you might be wondering at this point, well, how on earth or why on earth would we want to adopt the very system of government that we had just broken away from as a result of the Revolutionary War? Well, as a result of the Constitutional Convention of 1787, all right, that was called by the Congress of the Confederation, Delegate James Madison of Virginia, who would later become the fourth president of the United States, submitted his Virginia Plan, which contained 15 proposals of reform for the Articles of Confederation, which was our Constitution at the time. All right. Proposal number 7 presented the idea that the national legislature, which would be comprised of 2 houses, at that time it only had 1, would choose the executive, who would serve a non-renewable single term in office, and thus he would be a member of the legislature itself. Now, that proposal reads as follows. The national legislature would choose a national executive to serve a single term. The executive would have a general authority to execute the national laws, as well as the executive powers granted to the Confederation Congress, including the power to make war and treaties. End quote. Madison is technically silent on whether or not the national executive would have been elected by both the first branch of the national legislature, which would have become the House of Representatives, and the second branch, which would become the Senate, or whether either house would carry out this function individually, or whether or not this person would be from the legislature itself. But let us not fall into the trap of naivete. All right, one thing's for sure, 2 things for certain, is that this executive, chosen directly by the national legislature, would almost certainly come from that body itself. There would be no real separation of powers between the executive and legislative branches of government. So therefore, we have 2 distinct possibilities over how such election would have been carried out and what system we would have had as a result. And they are as follows. The first type is parliamentary America. Under this idea, we would have a parliamentary form of government very resemblant to the Westminster style found in the United Kingdom and other countries that Great Britain has obviously created as a result of colonialism. All right. Now, the party most represented in the lower house of the national legislature, which for the U.S. would be the House of Representatives, would be the one which controlled the direction of the national government. And the leader of that party would become the prime minister. Of course, in America, we prefer the term president and would likely have that official styling for the head of government in the U.S., all right, which is a deviation from most parliamentary systems of and in itself, all right. Another deviation that America would have for its parliamentary system is that this president, the national executive, would also be the head of state. In most parliamentary systems, the head of state and the head of government are usually 2 different people. In the UK, for example, the monarch is the head of state. The prime minister is the head of government. Under our theoretical system here in America, this national executive would be both the head of state and the head of government. All right. So those are deviations from the traditional Westminster style parliamentary system. All right. Thus, each party in the House of Representatives would elect its leader, as they already do anyway. And after each congressional election, the leader of that majority party would become the new executive of the United States, who would be unable to succeed him or herself in office. They likely would have allowed that person to once again serve in a leadership role, but they'd likely have to sit out a term before standing for leadership again. All right. And under this system, the Speaker of the House would resemble that of the Speaker of the House of Commons in the UK, who is politically neutral and merely behaves as an impartial traffic cop for that body. Okay. Now, as for the Senate, in most parliamentary systems, the upper house plays little to no role in the selection of the head of government. All right. And thus, I beg to see how the United States of America would have evolved any differently. In parliamentary systems, the head of government always comes from the lower house. And again, in America, that's the House of Representatives. And that's almost certainly how the U.S. would have evolved too. The head of government would have come from the House of Representatives. That body probably would have been the body choosing this national executive. And thus that person would become our head of government, a member of the House of Representatives, as well as our head of state. All right. The next distinct possibility is that we would have a Speaker of the House style election to choose this national executive. All right. Somewhat parliamentary, though not as rigidly parliamentary as the first option. So under this is that the selection method for the national executive, again, based in the House of Representatives, not in the Senate, could have taken the form of how that body chooses its speaker today. One or more candidates would have to submit their names for the executive position, and one of these candidates would need to win a clear majority after at least one round of balloting in order to win the executive position. Again, as partisanship dominates everything in the United States of America, this person quite obviously will be a member of the majority party represented in the House of Representatives. In this way, the person who wins may quite likely be the leader of that majority party, all right, already. And they might be serving in two roles as both the executive and the leader of that majority party, or someone else who, while not being the leader of that majority party, who wishes to serve as the national executive for a single term, while sitting out an election, would become the new executive before standing in again as possible. All right. So make sure we're all on the same page. That person under this system who ultimately becomes head of government may or may not be the leader of the majority party in the House. That the leader of the majority party may indeed put their name in the hat to be the national executive. And if elected, great, you're the national executive as well as the leader of the majority party. But again, another person who is not the leader of the majority party may put their name in the hat to be the national executive. And that person, not serving as the leader of the majority party, could possibly win, and they would become the national executive, the president. All right. And they would serve a single term. All right. While sitting out an election before standing again for election to said office. So in any case, we are looking at a default, somewhat of a term limit where they could not succeed themselves in office. They have to stand out an election first before once again standing for leadership. All right. So that's how these two theoretical systems could possibly work for parliamentary government in America, a full parliamentary government and a quasi parliamentary system. Again, the executive under both situations is a direct member of the House of Representatives, all right, still continuing to serve as a member of the legislature as well as serving as the national executive. That is the key feature of this parliamentary system, either option. This person chosen as national executive is not just becoming national executive and that's it. They are serving as national executive as well as continuing to serve as a member of the legislature. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a parliamentary government 101. That is what you find in Great Britain. That is what you find in Canada and a litany of other countries around the world that have adopted Westminster-style parliamentary systems, folks. And that's how parliamentary government works. The head of government is always a member of the legislature, and they continue to serve in an executive format while also continuing to serve as a legislator. And that's why in Westminster-style parliamentary systems, there is no direct separation of powers between the executive and legislative branches, essentially, because the executive is a member of the legislature itself, all right? And thus, there's no real check on that authority. And in most parliamentary systems, for the record, the head of state has little to no power. So what do you all think? Had Proposal 7 of Madison's Virginia plan been adopted, which of the two options do you think would have been most likely to develop in the United States? Option 1, a parliamentary America, or option 2, a semi-parliamentary America with a Speaker of the House style election? I'd love to hear what you think now that I've taught you a little about parliamentary government. So any questions or controversies, leave them down below and I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you for watching my video. Hope I taught you something. You learned at least a little bit. Knowledge is power. Stay safe out there. I'll talk to you at the next video. Peace out.